Okay, 11.2, surface area of cylinders, cones, and spheres. Again, we have a description of a cylinder, solid figure, and a cone. Cylinders have two bases, cones have a circular base. Okay. So again, we start with a net. Notice that the cylinder, the bases are circular, and the side is one complete piece. It is a rectangle. Think about a soup can label. If you take a soup can and peel the label off, it is a rectangle. So that is always going to be the shape of the lateral side of a cylinder. Okay? A cone, like a pyramid, has only one base, and its lateral side is a curved surface. It's kind of like if you take an ice cream cone, slice it, and lay it out. This is what the surface looks like, or the side looks like for a cone. Okay. To find the total surface area, you would add the areas of the base and the area of what's called the lateral side. You would do the same thing for a cone. Okay, so the base of a cylinder is always a circle. The area for a circle is pi r squared. All right. The perimeter of a circle is called the circumference. That is the same as the perimeter. So we have the same formula as we did with prisms, except we specifically put in information for circles. Okay, so this is your formula, but I want to show you a simplified version of this that you may or may not want to use. Notice that both of these terms have a 2. They both have pi, and they each have at least one r. So that is the greatest common factor. I can factor that out, 2 pi r. And when I take 2 pi r out of this first term, I'm left with 1 r. And if I take 2 pi r out of the second term, I'm left with h. You can use either of these formulas and they will work for you. Okay? Now, when we go to the cone, remember we had that curved surface here. We need to use the slant height. Now we use the slant height or the lateral height of the cone. These are one and the same. We use slant height for the pyramid, so we're going to use lateral height. For example, slant height. Okay, so we need to make sure we're clear. H is the distance from the apex of the cone drawn perpendicular to the base of the cone. That is your capital H. We have our radius, and notice we have a right triangle, so we can find our lateral height or our slant height by using the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so that's how we get L. So now when we want to find the area, a surface area of a cone, we have the base plus pi r L. Okay, and this represents the curved surface. Now, again, notice that both terms have pi, both terms have at least one r. So we could factor out a pi and an r. If I take pi and r out of this first term, I have one r left over. And if I take pi and r out of this term, I'm left with the slant height. So again, you can use either one of these formulas when finding the surface area of a cylinder or a cone. So let's look at some examples. Okay. So up here on the top, I'm going to go ahead and write down the surface area for a cylinder, 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh, which is the same as 2 pi r times r plus h. Okay, this is my r, and this is my h. These are the bases, and this is the side. So, if I calculate the base, well, I'm not going to calculate the base. I'm going to go ahead and just plug it into the formula. Surface area equals 2 pi. My r is 4 squared plus 2 pi 4 times 7. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the math with the numbers and leave pi. I'm not going to plug that value in yet. So 4 squared is 16, 16 times 2, 32 pi plus 4 times 7 is 28, 28 times 2 is 56. So I have 32 pi plus 56 pi. I can add these two together and I get 88 pi. Now I'm going to use my calculator and take 88 times pi and use the pi button. Don't use 3.14, use the pi button. And we get 276.46. We're instructed to round to the nearest tenth. This is the nearest tenth, which means I need to look at the next digit to determine if I'm going to raise that 4 to a 5 or leave it alone. Since the next digit is a 6, this 4 is going to become a 5. So we have 276.5. I don't have any units, so I'm just going to put UN squared. All right. Moving on to example 2, notice this is the diameter. So the first thing we need to do to find the radius is take 14, divide it by 2, and that gives us 7. So I'm going to work this two ways. I'm going to work it with the original formula, and then I'm going to work it with the simplified formula. So I have surface area 2 pi r, which is 7, squared, plus 2 pi r times 8, h, which is 8. This first term, 98 pi. This second term, 112 pi. Add these two together, 210 pi. Use the calculator, get 210 times pi, and you get 659.73. Again, we're rounding to the nearest tenth. Our next digit is a 3, so we're going to leave the 7 as is, 659.7. They gave us kilometers, so kilometers squared. Okay. Now I'm going to work it using the simplified. The simplified formula tells us we're going to take 2 pi times r. And then we're going to multiply it by the sum of r plus h. So 7 plus 8 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. 30 times 7 is 210. And we get the same answer. Okay. All right, example 3 and 4 are cones. So again, we have a circular base and a curved surface for our lateral. For a cone, our formula is, let me get it up here, SA equals pi r squared plus pi RL, or the simplified pi r times r plus L. Okay? So, for example 3, that blocked off. Surface area equals pi times the radius, which is 13 squared, plus pi times the radius times the slant height. 13 squared, 169 pi, 13 times 30, 390 pi. Add those together, 559 pi gives us 1,756.15, which means that to the nearest tenth, 1,756.2 square units. Okay? Now, for example 4, we already saw in example 2 how we can use the simplified formula. For example 4, I'm going to use the simplified formula. Okay, now notice, they give us the diameter. So again, we need to find the radius by dividing the diameter by 2. So now we have surface area equals pi times the radius, which is 8, times the radius, which is 8, plus the slant height. Okay. Add these together, multiply it by 8, we get 251.2 pi. Plug that in the calculator, and you get 789.16. Again, we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so we get 789.2 square units. Okay. Our last example, we're going to work backwards again. Okay? We are given the radius, we're given the total surface area, and we want to find the height of the cylinder. Okay? So again, we can start with the original formula and plug in what we know and solve for h. We're given that the surface area, 462 pi. Our radius is 7, so 2 pi times 7 squared plus 2 pi times 7 h. Doing the math, we get 98 pi plus 14 pi h. We want to solve for h. We need to subtract the 98 pi, which gives us 364 pi equals 14 pi h, and then divide by 14 pi. Notice these cancel out. Notice your pi's will cancel out. And you get h equals 26 centimeters. And you have solved for h.